Reshoots are often treated with suspicion by people not in the movie business. They take it as a sign a movie is in serious trouble and desperately needs fixing. But the truth is, most major movies build reshoots into their schedule. That said, there are plenty of well-documented movies that really were in trouble and undertook severe reshoots to try and fix the problems. So, with that in mind, movies where the reshoots were painfully obvious. Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. By the time the 6th Halloween movie came out, the series had run out of steam in a big way. To re-energize it, they introduced an origin story for Michael Myers' stab-happy ways with a subplot about mystic cults and rune stones. The producers weren't happy with it during test screenings and decided it needed to move faster and be a lot gorier. They also made the classy decision to remove most of the scenes with series star Donald Pleasance, who died shortly after filming, because they were too boring. And so they shot a whole new finale, redid scenes with Pleasance using a stand-in and added excessive gore like an exploding head. This results in massive continuity issues and characters that seem to disappear without explanation. With no Pleasance to rework the ending, Halloween 6 now ends abruptly with the sound of his character screaming, which implies that Myers has killed him, and then adding "in memory of Donald Pleasance" over the credits. The movie still sucked with the added footage, but it at least gave Paul Rudd his first lead role, and he has a scene where he beats Myers to death with a pipe, so the movie isn't a total loss.
Fast X. It's no secret that Fast X had a rough start to production, with franchise veteran director Justin Lin quitting the film mid-days into production, allegedly due to difficulties working with lead Vin Diesel. The rest of the shoot seemed to go relatively smoothly under Lin's replacement Louis Leterrier, but it's tough to deny that the movie's mid-credit scene ends up sticking out like a sore thumb, for better or worse. Said sequence reveals the surprise return of Luke Hobbs, played by Dwayne Johnson, to the series, surprising given that Johnson previously vowed he wouldn't return to the mainline Fast franchise due to his highly publicised disagreements with Diesel. Yet Johnson indeed returns in the mid-credit scene, in what's clearly a case of the filmmakers pushing the "in case of emergency, Dwayne Johnson" button, given the series' generally declining popularity. Leterrier himself confirmed that the scene was later shot, and considering that Hobbs spent most of the scene wearing a face mask with Johnson's face visible only for a few seconds at the end, with a stand-in likely performing most of the scene, it's clear this thing was cobbled together very much last minute.
The Predator. Though it was well publicised ahead of The Predator's release that the film had been through extensive reshoots, even blissfully unaware audiences had a pretty good chance of figuring it out from the messy end result. The biggest evidence of this to point your fingers at is the egregious time changes that go on throughout the film. Sometimes it's day, then suddenly it's night, and then we're back to day again. I don't know where I am, man. But worst of all, there's the laughable sequel-baiting final scene, which introduces an Iron Man-like suit called the Predator Killer. It's utter desperation and couldn't reek more aggressively of reshoot fodder.
Jaws: The Revenge. The sheer terror on the faces of Universal executives as they sat down to watch Jaws: The Revenge can only be imagined. Not the terror that comes with watching a great horror movie, it's the terror of realising they've spent millions to make such a turkey. No amount of reshoots would have salvaged it, but they did decide to add a new ending to make it a little happier. The original climax saw the mother of the family being hunted by the psychic vengeful shark, long story, impaling it with a broken bowsprit. It thrashed around in pain and destroyed the boat before finally dying. The effects looked abysmal, and test audiences were sad that the friendly Jamaican scientist was eaten. So the new ending had the shark explode for no apparent reason when it's impaled, and the scientist somehow survives. The new footage jars so badly that it is immediately apparent something is wrong. The crude model used for the exploding shark is a total embarrassment, and archive footage of the shark's death from the original movie is spliced in to complete the effect. They also failed to mask that it was shot in a tank. The ocean can be seen washing over the sky in the background.
The Marvels. Though the Marvel Cinematic Universe schedules reshoots for every single one of their movies before anything has even been shot, in the case of the Marvels, the additional photography clearly wasn't just to fix minor technical and editorial issues that were only discovered during post-production. Last year, reports emerged that the Marvels ultimately underwent 4 weeks of reshoots in order to make its narrative more coherent, and it's fair to say that the end result has a major aura of studio notes all over it. Though the suspiciously short 105-minute runtime didn't inherently indicate a problem, while watching the movie, it's painfully obvious that additional expository dialogue was added during reshoots to further explain both the central body-swapping gimmick and villain Darben's plan. These stiffly written moments stick out like a sore thumb, and Ashton herself also confirmed that she ended up reshooting basically the whole movie, likely explaining why Darben's presence in the film feels so awkward and stilted.
Beverly Hills Ninja. It's decidedly less common for comedy movies to get substantial reshoots, and generally they're employed simply to connect takes together that don't quite fit, and usually due to improv stuff or to fine-tune jokes that didn't fully land during test screenings. Beverly Hills Ninja was the final film that Chris Farley released during his lifetime, and once principal photography had wrapped, the troubled actor's substance issues sadly returned with a relapse, reportedly due to anxiety over how the movie would be received. By the time that Farley returned for reshoots, he was noticeably larger in size. It creates an uncomfortable image of a man suffering through a comedic guise, and his tragic death of a drug overdose less than a year after the film was released is a harrowing insight.
X-Men Origins Wolverine. X-Men Origins Wolverine had a famously messy production where the director Gavin Hood and the head of Fox constantly argued about every facet of the movie. Things got so bad at one point that Hood turned up to a set to find it painted a different colour to the one he'd approved, which was retouched because his choice was apparently too depressing. In the months leading up to release, Origins had extensive reshoots which were apparently centred around Deadpool. But from the final film, it's clear a lot more was changed, as the story is a patchwork of scenes badly stitched together. It wants to be a comic book movie, a revenge thriller, a partial reboot, a wacky comedy, and a romantic drama all at once. It's a movie that features innocent villagers being slaughtered, and then a scene of Wolverine accidentally slashing up a bathroom with his terrible CGI claws that comes right out of a sitcom. What started out as a straightforward origin story for Wolverine was badly compromised during shooting, and the final product bears those scars.
Next Goal Wins. Even if you weren't aware that Taika Waititi's new sports comedy Next Goal Wins underwent reshoots in 2021 to replace Armie Hammer with Will Arnett, it's pretty clear from the end product that something is a little off in almost all of Arnett's scenes. Arnett, stepping in for Hammer after sexual misconduct allegations were levelled against the latter, plays the new partner of football coach Thomas Rungan, played by Michael Fassbender's ex-wife Gail, Elizabeth Moss, and almost his entire performance is blatantly disconnected from the rest of the movie. Arnett only briefly shares the screen with Fassbender, insisting spending the bulk of his role awkwardly quartered away in mid-shots with few other cast members except Elizabeth Moss. The film's extensively delayed release, combined with its choppy editing and how clunkily Arnett's role is plugged into the rest of the movie, make it obvious that this thing went through the post-production mangle.
The Cloverfield Paradox. It's no secret that the Cloverfield Paradox had quite the tumultuous journey, making its way to audiences, languishing in post-production for almost 18 months before finally being shadow-dropped on Netflix after 2018's Super Bowl. But the film wasn't simply dumped on the streaming platform without any fine-tuning at all, despite the underwhelming end result. The film's B-plot, where Ava's husband Michael is caught up in an alien invasion on Earth, was added entirely in reshoots, reportedly due to test audiences wanting to know what was happening on Earth while the main story transpired in space. And to be honest, you can totally tell that these scenes have been tacked on, as they obviously feel disconnected to the main plot. So yeah, be careful what you wish for, I guess.
Fantastic Four. In the modern era, when there are problems on a movie set, that information is going to get leaked eventually. So there was no hiding the many clashes director Josh Trank had with his cast, crew, 20th Century Fox, or even his landlord. And the final version of the film shown in cinemas is one he doesn't seem happy about. Neither was anyone else. People watching the release version can instinctively feel that something is off. The pacing feels strange, with a slow first hour suddenly followed by a rushed CGI-heavy finale that feels like a completely different movie. Lots of big scenes that were widely seen in the trailer, such as the Thing dropping from a plane onto a military base, were missing in the final cut. But the easiest way to tell if a scene is reshot is to look at Kate Mara's hair. If it's a hideous wig, then that's a clear sign it was part of the hasty reshoot. The pickups didn't help the bad buzz surrounding Fantastic Four, and it eventually tanked at the box office.
In The Exorcist Believer. The Exorcist franchise is certainly no stranger to post-production hell, but the shambolic recent sequel, The Exorcist Believer, wears its editorial battle scars on its sleeve. If you felt that the bleak climax, in which the demon manages to drag one of the two possessed girls, Catherine, played by Olivia O'Neill, to hell, clashed harshly with the strangely hopeful montage afterwards, that's because this was not actually the original plan. Director David Gordon Green confirmed that the film originally ended with a clean win for the heroes, presumably with Catherine surviving alongside Angela, played by Lydia Jewett. But after deciding that it just didn't feel honest, he reshot a more downcast fate for Catherine. The mood whiplash of the demon's partial victory before the weirdly upbeat ending rings a false note. And that's because Green made changes to the story in post-production without reshaping the tone to match. If you've noticed or can think of any more, then let us know in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a cheeky like, share and subscribe too.
All the money in the world. While everybody knows that Ridley Scott's All the Money in the World went through historically swift reshoots to replace Kevin Spacey with Christopher Plummer following the former's career-derailing sexual abuse allegations, there's another aspect of the film that makes said reshoots even more glaringly obvious. Mark Wahlberg plays former CIA operative and negotiator Fletcher Chase in the crime thriller, but when Scott was scrambling to organise the last-minute reshoots mere weeks away from the film's release date, Wahlberg was already busy working on his next movie, Mile 22, and for that film, Wahlberg had dropped £30, a difference which immediately draws attention to every single scene that he shot for Scott's movie. Not only is his face noticeably more gaunt, but his clothes have a much looser fit, and Wahlberg also had his hair styled slightly differently during the reshoots, so it's like watching two different people. It's understandable why these changes had to be made, but it's still incredibly obvious.
Thanksgiving. Eli Roth's Thanksgiving is a fun slasher romp for sure, albeit one that begins to fall apart in its final 10 minutes as it becomes abundantly clear that something went wrong with the climax during principal photography. The finale feels incredibly rushed and has a number of inconsistencies which suggest the scene was majorly messed around with during post-production. Firstly, Jessica brutally twists her ankle while fleeing the killer, yet mere seconds later, she doesn't show any signs of her injury while jogging to Sheriff Newland, played by Patrick Dempsey. When Jessica finally kills the killer, who happens to be Newland himself, his explosive demise is accompanied by both some blatantly ADR dialogue and an oddly quick cut to black. Seconds later, we cut to the aftermath, which now bafflingly takes place in daylight despite the final confrontation being set at night, and where another line is obviously dubbed in. Evidently, Roth decided to make some serious editorial changes to the film's finale in the post, as the choppiness suggests it was originally much longer and more involved.
Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix's post-production process involved a lengthy delay as director Simon Kinberg reshot significant portions of the film, including an entirely new ending which was done because of fears about their film appearing too similar to Captain Marvel. And you know what? The ending action sequence on the train is probably one of the best moments of the film. However, it doesn't sit well with the project overall. Another example of this is Jessica Chastain's character, who is only referred to as Vuk by name once in the film, and her entire backstory is changed to fit along with the new ending. Even the name drop itself is an obvious dub, and it's pretty slapdash when you notice it.
Fool's Paradise. Charlie Day's directorial debut, Fool's Paradise, is a film that basically has post-production woes stamped on his forehead. Even if you weren't aware that Day's surreal comedy project began filming all the way back in 2018, it's evident from the rough short-end production that this thing is a Frankenstein-type collage of footage desperately held together with crazy glue and crossed fingers. There's a chaotic energy to the entire movie which makes the extensive reshoots the least surprising outcome imaginable. As it turns out, after receiving some notes from filmmaker pal Guillermo del Toro, Day actually went and filmed an additional 27 pages of material. Going by the typical minute per page screenwriting rule of thumb, this indicates that almost a third of the 97-minute movie is comprised of scenes filmed more than 3 years after the original shoot.
X-Men 2. As soon as Hugh Jackman wrapped principal photography on the second X-Men movie, he grew his hair out long so that he could start shooting Van Helsing just a few months later. However, during post-production, Bryan Singer realized that he needed Jackman to return to do some pickups. And so, with Jackman's hair no longer matching his original original Wolverine do, and now sporting a full thick mane with no sideburns, the makeup crew had to resort to fitting Jackman with a wig and fake sideburns. The results are incredibly obvious, with Wolverine's reshoot coiffure style totally different to the rest of the film. It didn't stop the flick from being an outstanding banger, but it's hysterical when it puts side by side.
Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. If it feels like the ending to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was hastily stapled onto the end of the movie, that's because it absolutely was. Literally, Quantumania's final ending was filmed less than a month before its premiere, surely explaining why it feels so oddly out of step with the rest of the movie. Even if Kang, played by Jonathan Mayer's all-too-easy defeat is a little bit odd, it's the deeply bizarre final scene which strikes a truly bewildering note. With Kang defeated, life appears to return to normal for Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, even as Scott can't shake the feeling that something even worse is coming. At a party for Cassie, played by Catherine Newton, Scott takes a bite into his dessert, and just as it appears that something ominous is going to happen, he simply reacts in disgust to the food, and the scene abruptly smash cuts to the credits. Clearly, director Peyton Reed was trying to toy with audience expectations a little, but it basically ends up falling totally flat, like the frantic last-minute addition it blatantly was. Given that the original ending apparently saw Kang survive and Scott and Hope, played by Evangeline Lilly, get stranded in the quantum realm, somebody at Marvel Studios apparently thought better of this bleak cliffhanger, yet wanted to assure audiences that Kang wasn't gone for good.